Meet Chad. After recently getting dumped by his uncle, he decided to set out on his own journey. Acquiring only 100 push-ups and a 10-kilometer run, he locked his account to only untradable gear, all in the hopes of discovering something new. Welcome to Life of Chad. Back to the Life of Chad, our untradable gear-locked Ironman. And honestly, we need to solve a problem. Ranged on this account is especially brutal right now. Our best in slot crossbow is the Blurite crossbow. At first, this doesn't seem to be too big of a deal, right? I mean, the Blurite crossbow is bad, but people train with the Dorgeshin crossbow and bone bolts all the time. However, there's a reason why people train with that crossbow. Ammo is not only cheap, it's easy to obtain. Comparing this to the Blurite crossbow, however, the bolts we have to manually obtain as they are completely untradable. As you see, this is not located near any banks. You could technically use a ferry ring to get to the ice dungeon. The issue, however, isn't just getting to the dungeon. You have to world hop for every single ore, as the spawn rate of this ore is really slow. 25 seconds to be exact. And if you've ever asked someone that's mined a ton of Blurite ore, they don't want to do it again. So how does one solve this problem? Well, we have a few solutions, one of which we do have, the crystal bow. However, that does require 70 range. Now, for those of you that are new to the series, for every Untradable, we like to do a little showcase. This is the crystal bow. It requires 50 agility and 70 range, and it requires the completion of roving elves to equip. It has a range bonus of plus 100 and a range strength of plus 78, thus being pretty much the best mid-tier range weapon you can possibly use. There's only very few untradable range weapons that beat this, and it does work with crystal armor, so it's even more DPS. The main downside though is the lifespan. It only lasts 2 hours. And 2 hours is not long, factoring in the cost to get one. The first one is 900k, but they do decrease going forwards to the minimum of 180k. 180k for a crystal bow wouldn't be too bad. However, getting those first few is gonna hurt our pockets, because we don't have a viable way to make a ton of GP currently. Not quick, at least. Now the other option, which would be really good long term, as the ammo is extremely cheap, would be the magic shortbow imbued with broad arrows. However, of course there are some caveats with this. The magic shortbow imbued, 1, is not as strong as the crystal bow with broad arrows, and 2, obtaining the magic shortbow is actually quite difficult. Obtaining a magic shortbow is kind of the hard part in all this, as the only item sources for this specifically are hard caskets having a rarity from 1 of 27, or a spiritual ranger, which also has a requirement of 63 slayer. Now you can also create one with 80 fletching, however, none of those are inherently easy to obtain right away. How's it going, everyone, and welcome back to the Life of Chad. Whilst I was thinking about these range training methods, I decided to take a little break, and I did some agility just because we kind of needed them on this account. I'm going for a few items, and in order to obtain them and long-term goals for the account, we kind of need 70 agility. So I went on ahead and I grinded some Brimhaven agility courses, and we're about ready to buy all the agility tickets for our final level, and there we go. 70 agility, boys. Now this is going to unlock quite a bit of stuff for the account. As you know, we can now do God Wars. We have the Brimhaven, I think it's it's the Taverley dungeon shortcut for the dragons, so we don't have to walk all the way around. We can do Saradomin, and then there's just so much stuff that 70 agility unlocks for the account, which is why we needed. And the reason why I was doing Brimhaven agility course, there is an untradable we can unlock here, which I'm going to allow you all to look into, because it's probably going to be quite some time before I even attempt it because of the amount of tickets it's going to cost. And after we ended up doing some agility training, I decided to go on ahead and use up the rest of our Blurite ores that we had in the bank and go ahead and make them into unfinished bolts. The issue with these, of course, like I was talking about previously, is that they just take forever to make. Not only do they take forever to make, they take forever to mine. So ideally this is just going to be the last bit that I'm making, and whether or not we use them will just be entirely dependent. But since they're a quick way to AFK and do some things, I thought I'd go ahead and use them up. So talking about what our ideal methods are going to be, I think I've come to a conclusion on what we're going to be training, and let's go ahead and talk about that. So in order to get 70 range, we need about 329,000 XP, which is about the same amount of XP we have already earned. Since I've already done all the Blurite mining previously, I'm just going to say I'm not really feeling up for that. But let's go ahead and do some DPS calculations just to see what we'd get. Based on the DPS calculator factoring in 4 XP per damage per second on sand crabs, with our current setup, Shazian plus Blurite Seabow and bolts, we'd get about 6.5 XP per hour, and that would take about 14 hours just AFKing sand crabs. Not the greatest, but it is definitely doable. Now, if we decide to go for an upgrade, i.e. let's say full void, as there's not a ton of good range upgrades that are untradable, full void plus a Blurite crossbow brings it up to 7.144 XP per second, and that would bring the time to around 12.8 hours. So just getting full void saves about an hour. Now let's talk about XP per hour with our upgraded bows. So full void plus magic short bow imbued would be about 12.06 XP per hour, which, factoring in everything, would be about 7.59 hours at sand crabs. And full void plus crystal bow would be about 13.92 XP per hour, or around 6.57 hours. Now the calculations aren't like perfect by any means. I think I forgot to equip the beads of the dead for those of you that actually pay attention to some of the upgrades, but they're going to be close enough. The main issue though was that in order to be 70 range, that's what you need to equip the crystal bow, so that's not a fair comparison. However, it just shows that the crystal bow would grant us more DPS, more XP per hour than everything else, no matter what we use. This also shows that the Blurite crossbow is just really weak and not a good way to train XP anymore. Early level sure, but nowadays it's just not sufficient in the long term. And I know you're probably all thinking, well, you just talked about how the Blurite crossbow is trash and you're making bolts. And I'm about to show you why I made these bolts. However, we need to talk about what we're actually going to do to train range instead of using the Blurite crossbow. That's right, pest control. Apart from just unlocking full void at pest control, this minigame actually grants us some really good XP, at least compared to the Blurite crossbow. In fact, figuring out the math, it's about the same, without having the need to grind for the Blurite ore. Therefore, this is going to be our next stop on the Chad Island. So, primarily for pest control, my main task that I was doing was just standing up here and attacking these little minions as they were popping up. Our main issue, however, is occasionally we just wouldn't get enough DPS because there's either like a lot of bots that come up here, or like maybe they're real players, but there's like 14 of them and they try attacking the same creature as once. So after a while of just using the rapier, we ended up switching to the barrel chest anchor, and it did do us a lot better in maintaining it, as our first hit was typically higher than. So after several hours of pest control and doing the same thing, just AFKing, clicking those every so often, we end up finally getting enough points to buy ourselves some of our best in slot gear, untradables, for probably the near future. Hopefully we can get a LVLS eventually, and then I'll probably come back and grind out some more. But we're just going to get the void top, bottom. I don't remember if you need the gloves, but I bought them anyways because I was kind of on edge. We 100% bought the Ranger one because that's what our main goal was, to get our range setup all upgraded today. And we also were debating on the Mage versus the Melee Helm. Ultimately, I decided, well, if I'm going to grind this out some more, I'm just going to get the Melee Helm instead of the mage helm, as I wasn't really going to train mage for like the next couple hours getting these last points. So we ended up just switching to the melee helm, and then we're just going to continue grinding on. And now for anybody wondering why we didn't try training ranged whilst it, since it would be killing 2 birds in 1 stone, the main issue is we just couldn't deal enough damage. Like, here's just some clip of me just trying it after I got the full gear just to see if maybe, and honestly, like, we just can't compete with anything. And I highly doubt we get 100 damage after a whole game. Even if we weren't competing, like, we'd be having to try pretty hard, and ideally we want to just AFK as much as possible and play this on in the background for this game, because this isn't my favorite minigame in the world by any means, and I doubt a lot of people love this minigame, but it's decent AFK sometimes. This is the Void Knight equipment, often referred to as the Void set, Void armor, or just Void in general. It's a set of armor which can be purchased from the Void Knives with accommodation points, and it requires 42 attack, strength, defense, hit points, range, and magic, along with 22 prayer to equip. Benefit with Void is that Void Knight armor contributes defense bonuses to all stats equally, including magic and range, without lowering any attack bonuses. Wearing a complete set offers various combat bonuses, which makes this armor very popular for players using multiple attack styles, and players can attach the Shattered Relics Void Ornament Kits to change the cosmetic looks of these set pieces. And I probably could if I wanted to, but it doesn't make them any more untradable. It's just more for fashionscape. So in addition to each item's stats, Void Knight armor has a set effect depending on which helm you equip. For the base set effect of the Void melee helm, you get plus 10% to melee damage and accuracy. The Ranger is plus 10 to range damage and accuracy. And then the Void Maid helm is plus 45% to magic accuracy. Compared to other range armor, the Void Knight range set generally increases the max hit, but it has less accuracy, making it good versus low defense monsters, but worse against the high defense monsters. This is kind of the idea why Shazian was sometimes better for specific monsters compared to the Void set. The Void range set is best used against monsters with low defense, while the melee set best competes with other melee gear on monsters with higher defense. And finally, after all that grinding for Void, you thought we were done? Unfortunately not, because in order for us to get our 70 range, we're going to have to be sitting here for like 12 hours. So we ended up grinding a bit today, and we're spending all our 300 points that we got, and that should put us at, I think, 66 range we're about to see. Yep, looks like 66 ranged. Only 4 more levels. That should take another 2 to 3 days of grinding. Alright, we're back again after another day of grinding pest control. Let's go see what our total points ended up being. I always have an issue trying to find this guy. Looks like we got 212 points. It's not a lot, but I mean 212 is about a 4 hours worth, I think. 3 to 4. We ended up spending 100 there. And then we spent another 100, and there we go. We're at 67 ranged. Now also with 67 range, I'm also decided to just split out my combat levels. I was primarily doing strength, but I switched to attack. So right now we're 72 attack and 72 strength. If we can actually get to 75 attack, that gives us one step closer to our Untradable whip and possibly another Untradable. Another bit of grinding done, and we're back at the Void Knight outpost. We're going to spend some more points, and this time we're up to 68 ranged, or right on the cusp, unfortunately. Oh yeah, and I forgot there was an untradable item here that we completely missed out on. So instead we're just going to loop back around. We're going to go into this shop right here, and right here there's an item that you all probably haven't seen before, unless it's been talked about by another series. Let's show you what it is. It's called Field Ration. This is the Field Ration. Field Rations can be bought from the Void Knight General Store in Pest Control, or the Jennifer's General Supplies in Shazian. I'm not entirely sure if I talked about this then or not, but either way, they can be eaten to restore 10 hit points, making the items effectively equivalent to a tuna. They're one of the few food sources in the game that are actually untradable, and they cost 390 GP to buy. Man, that's a steal. And here we go again. We did a lot more grinding this time. Hopefully get us some points to finish up our little bit. So again, I wish these guys stayed in the same place. It'd be easier just to exchange them. But this time we got 384 points, which should get us pretty close to our end goal. Spending 100 points. And then after all this, we are at 69 ranged. Nice. And finally, the grind is now over for this. We're spending our last points now. And we're here to finally celebrate a 70 range on the account. And you know what this means, boys. And here it is, our sexy range chat setup. This is actually a really big improvement, as we can actually pretty much kill almost anything without too big of an issue now, and we don't really need to grind. Our main concern is going to be replacing this crystal bow, and there's probably going to be a need in the future, especially if we're going to grind a lot, to get our magic short bow, but this should be a perfectly good alternative for the time being. And with grinding pest control for so long, we end up getting 900k, so we can buy our first refill on the bow. Thank you all, and goodbye.